Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Here are tonight's headlines.
Devastating floods have torn through entire villages and killed at least 128 people in Europe, most of them in Western Germany, where stunned emergency services were still combing the wreckage by Friday.
The extreme drought hit the western United States, braced for more wildfire destruction as efforts to contain a vast blaze scorching southern Oregon failed to progress, and dangerous dry lightning storms were forecast in California.
What's going on ahead of them has been the biggest struggle, I feel like.
And Tokyo Olympics organizers revealed the first COVID-19 case in the Games Village on Saturday as they sought to reassure competitors that the pandemic-delayed event would be safe.
And the EU's disease agency said it was predicting a sharp increase in coronavirus cases with nearly 5 times as many new infections by August 1st.
First, devastating floods have torn through entire villages and killed at least 128 people in Europe, most of them in Western Germany, where stunned emergency services were still combing the wreckage on Friday. Unsuspecting residents were caught completely off guard by the torrent, dubbed the Flood of Death by German newspaper Bild. Take a look.
Wohnt hier und die sind seit einem halben Jahr am Umbauen, am Renovieren und wollten in 2 Wochen einziehen. Und vorgestern kam er dann abends ich glaube um 6, 7 Uhr fing das an, das Wasser immer höher und 10 Minuten später stand das Wasser im Haus. Ja, wie fühlt man sich in der Situation? Ne? Hilflos, aber es muss ja weitergehen. Ne? Wir räumen jetzt auf, gucken, was los ist. Es sind andere Häuser, die sind mehr betroffen. Aber ist natürlich, wie man sieht, sehr viel Arbeit und man muss gucken, wie das dann alles finanziell geht. Ne?
Das kann man gar nicht in Worte fassen. Unmöglich. Geht nicht. Von jetzt auf gleich, innerhalb von 2 Stunden. Wohnwagen sind weggeschwommen, PKW sind weggeschwommen, Bäume umgerissen, also Häuser eingestürzt und also noch mehr. Wir wohnen seit über 20 Jahren hier in Schuld und haben sowas in dem Ausmaß noch nicht erlebt. Ja, also das ist wie Krieg. Ja, also wir haben Glück im Unglück. Wir haben weiter oben gebaut. Ja.
Streets and houses were submerged by water in some areas, while cars were left overturned on soaked streets after floodwaters passed. Some districts were completely cut off. Adding to the devastation, several more people were feared dead in a landslide in the town of Erfstadt in North Rhine-Westphalia, triggered by the floods. In Germany's hard-hit Ahrweiler district in Rhineland-Palatinate, several houses collapsed completely, drawing comparisons to the aftermath of a tsunami. At least 24 people were confirmed dead in Euskirchen, one of the worst affected towns. In Ahrweiler, around 1,300 people were unaccounted for, although local authorities told Bild the high number was likely due to damaged phone networks. The severe storms have put climate change back at the center of Germany's election campaign ahead of a September 26th poll marking the end of Angela Merkel's 16 years in power. Speaking in Berlin, President Frank-Walter Steinmeier said Germany would only be able to curb extreme weather situations if we engage in determined fight against climate change. The country, he said, must prepare much better in the future. According to Interior Minister Horst Seehofer, adding that this extreme weather is a consequence of climate change. Because a warmer atmosphere holds more water, climate change increases the risk and intensity of flooding from extreme rainfall.
Meanwhile, in neighboring Belgium, the government confirmed the death toll had jumped to 20. Earlier reports had said 23 dead, with more than 21,000 people left without electricity in one region. Calling the floods possibly the most catastrophic the country has ever seen, Prime Minister Alexander De Croo declared Tuesday a day of national mourning. Take a look.
journée de deuil national, ce qui veut dire que les drapeaux seront à halfstock, je ne sais pas quel... En berne, je m'excuse, je ne connaissais pas ce mot-là. Cela veut aussi dire naturellement qu'au maximum, on demande à tout le monde de respecter cela dans leur comportement. Il y aura aussi une minute de silence à midi qu'on demande au maximum de respecter.
On a monté toutes les affaires à l'intérieur qu'on pouvait. Et en fait, en 2 heures de temps, l'eau est passée de 5 cm à 30, 40, 50, 60, jusqu'à monter jusqu'à 1,50 m dehors. À l'intérieur, on s'en est sorti avec un peu moins de centimètres. Mais donc du coup, on a tout perdu. Tout ce qui est resté au rez-de-chaussée, on a tout perdu.
J'ai beaucoup de frustration et je suis assez dégoûtée parce que la commune n'a absolument rien fait du tout. Donc ce sont des jeunes qui sont venus nous apporter des sacs de sable. Quand j'ai téléphoné à la commune m'a dit qu'en fait, il n'y en avait pas, il n'y avait plus de sacs de sable. Donc je suis assez furax contre la commune, ça c'est sûr.
Interior Minister Annelies Verlinden said the death toll from the floods had risen to 20 people, with around 20 people missing. Earlier media reports had said 23 dead, and more than 120 people have died so far in floods that have devastated large areas of Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. In Belgium, waters have begun to recede and torrential rains have ceased, but thousands of emergency responders are still at work. De Cruz said flags on Tuesday will be flown at half-mast and a minute of silence would be held at midday. De Cruz says festivities marking the country's national holiday on July 21st also will be toned down, saying it comes at a time when so many people will still be in exceptionally difficult position. Many climate scientists said the link to global warming was unmistakable and the urgency to do something about it is undeniable. To say that climate change caused the flooding may be a step too far, but scientists insist that it exacerbates the extreme weather that has been on show from the western U.S. and Canada to Siberia to Europe's Rhine region.
Meanwhile, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said the intensity of flooding currently ravaging Europe is clear evidence of climate change. Take a look.
But it is the intensity and the length of these events where science tells us this is a clear indication of climate change. These are horrible events, the flooding events we see in Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg. And first of all, of course, our thoughts are with the victims, their families and their loved ones. The Commission has already activated the mechanisms to support and help those member states in this very, very difficult, catastrophic scenario.
She adds that the EU had mobilized support to nations hit by the floods, which have killed more than 100, principally in Germany. Meanwhile, Belgian authorities also said the country's death toll had risen, with 5 still missing. Most of the dead were found around Liège, a city of 200,000 people, despite an order for residents of central districts and areas bordering the Meuse River to evacuate. The water level in the Maas, as the Meuse River is known in Dutch, reached its maximum forecast height in Maastricht on Thursday night, but stayed below what authorities had termed the doom scenario, averting widespread flooding. By far, the highest death toll was in Germany, where rescuers were focusing their efforts on helping people trapped in their homes.
Now, our EBC correspondent Irene Juliet Arzaden talks about her current situation in Germany amid the floods. Take a look.
Some places here in North Rhine-Westphalia were very heavily flooded by the storm since yesterday. Currently, I am in Wuppertal. The electricity has been switched off here since in the morning. There are numerous road closures, no buses, no trains, no connection going in and out of the city. And the police also said that the residents should stay at home. Furthermore, rain is expected in a few hours again. And what you can see behind me is the Vupa River, which still raise up, even if it's not raining at the moment. From Wuppertal, I am Irene Judith Arsadon, reporting for EBC Bureau Germany. Stay safe, Bo, and we live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, the extreme drought hit western United States. Brace for more wildfire destruction as efforts to contain a vast blaze scorching southern Oregon failed to progress, and dangerous dry lightning storms were forecast in California. The bootleg fire near Oregon's border with California grew overnight to 240,000 acres, larger than New York City, and by far the biggest active blaze in the U.S., while remaining just 7% contained. Take a look.
Hi, I'm Bryce Melville with Oregon Department of Forestry. Behind us here we've got some machines working on creating a fuel break for the bootleg fire on the western edge as we're pushing north, trying to help keep this thing contained. It's hard with the saws. They're getting hot. Now I'm to shut down early, 2-3 o'clock. There's a pretty big fire risk with the saws. If they hit a rock, we can cause a lot of sparks. And then there's a fire on top of that, so it's trying to mitigate all those hazards and fallen trees and keeping through traffic available and aware of what's going on ahead of them has been the biggest struggle, I feel like.
More evacuation orders were issued late Thursday as firefighters had to withdraw from fast-growing flames and extreme fire conditions to the east of the blaze, which began 10 days ago and has grown at 1,000 acres per hour since. The fire also poses a risk to neighboring California's power supply, threatening to plunge residents into darkness, as has happened in past years when heat waves have strained the state's grid. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced further reinforcements would be sent to help fight the Oregon blaze, even as California battles its own fires, according to Governor's Office Emergency Services in a statement. Climate scientist Daniel Swain warned that the risk of wildfires ignited by dry lightning strikes forecast in California for this weekend is quite high. Last year's August complex fire, the largest in modern California history, which destroyed an area the size of Delaware, was triggered by a massive series of thousands of lightning strikes. Due to a long period of unrelenting and frequently record-breaking heat, California brush fire is drier than it would usually be at its August or September peak, warned Swain of the University of California, Los Angeles.
Claire Nullis, the spokesperson for the World Meteorological Organization, calls on countries to step up climate action following the devastating floods in Europe and record-high temperatures in the Gulf of Finland. The agency said that countries including Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg and the Netherlands had received up to 2 months' rain in 2 days from July 14 to 15 on ground that was already near saturation. Take a look.
Heavy rainfall has triggered devastating flooding, causing dozens of casualties in Western Europe. Germany and Belgium have been the worst affected in terms of loss of life. Seen images of houses being swept away. It's really, really devastating. Europe on the whole is prepared, but when you get extreme events such as what we've seen, 2 months worth of rainfall in 2 days, it's very, very difficult to cope. And I've seen photos this morning from I think it was Rhineland-Pfalz. Just it was utter devastation. It was heartbreaking. It's not just the flooding. At the same time, parts of Scandinavia are enduring a lasting heat wave. Just to give you one example, there's a place called Kuvala-Anjala, and my pronunciation's not very good. It's in southern Finland. It's seen 27 consecutive days with temperatures above 25 degrees Celsius. This is Finland. It's not Spain, it's not North Africa, it's Finland. The Gulf of Finland in the Baltic Sea is record warm, according to the researchers at the Finnish Meteorological Institute, up to 26.6 degrees Celsius on the 14th of July. So that's the warmest recorded temperature of the waters since records began. We need to step up climate action. We need to step up the level of ambition. We're not doing nearly enough to stay, within the targets of the Paris Agreement and keep temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius, even 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century.
Meanwhile, the Tokyo Olympics organizers revealed that the first COVID-19 case in the Games village have been discovered there on Saturday. Tyra Liu has more.
The chief of the Tokyo Olympics tried to reassure worried athletes on Saturday as the Games village was hit by its first coronavirus case 6 days before the pandemic-delayed event opens. As thousands of competitors pour into Japan for the Games, which will largely take place without spectators, the positive test for an unnamed person in the village heightened worries over biosecurity. First, let's listen to this.
スクリーニングテストで選手村にいた人が1人感染したという初めてのケースが報告されました。で、この人は昨日の PCR 検査で、陽性だということなんですけども、今はホテルに収容されています。では我々もどうしたらいいかということで IOC といろいろ意見交換をいたしました。で IOC はですね、国名を発表するとかなりの確率で個人が特定されてしまうということであります。でこれは個人情報に関わる問題であり、場合によると非常にシビアな問題になる可能性があると。
そして陽性者が出て、どういう状況で選手村あるいはその他の練習場で、地域で隔離をされているかということも公表をして、そしてどういう場合にあっても安心していけるんだっていうふうに思ってもらわなければいけませんので、そのことも含めて徹底した情報を共有と、そして情報の発信、そしてその対応、これをしっかりやっていきたいと思っています。
Hashimoto conceded that competitors at the Games, which were postponed for a year because of the pandemic, would be anxious about the virus situation, and she vowed that organizers would not hide cases. Mr. Muto said competitors at the Games would be tested every day, so if someone tests positive, that person will be isolated immediately, whether there are any close contacts or not. About 11,000 athletes and tens of thousands of officials and media are flying in for the Games, which open on Friday in the face of widespread public concern over a possible surge in infections. And with polls showing that many Japanese residents fear that hosting the Games could lead to a spike in the new COVID cases, it made it the job reassuring the public that the Olympics would be safe and secure. That much harder for the International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach and the top Japanese government officials who accompanied him Friday on a somber visit to Hiroshima. Bach insisted there was zero risk of athletes in the Olympic Village infecting anybody outside the area with COVID. But his message was undercut by reports that a 20-year-old Ugandan weightlifter training for the Olympics near the city of Osaka had gone missing after officials realized he hadn't gotten his required COVID test on Thursday. Some athletes have pulled out of the Games altogether, including Australian tennis star Nick Kyrgios and Australian basketball player Liz Cambage. Thousands of Tokyo Olympic volunteers have also quit. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said he hoped the Olympics would bring excitement, even without spectators, despite parts of Japan living under a state of emergency. Meanwhile, the capital remains under a coronavirus state of emergency and has in recent days recorded its highest case numbers since January. Right here from Tokyo, Japan, this is Siren Elpilia Lu for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Staying in Japan, a small group of protesters gather in Hiroshima to demonstrate against the International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach's visit to the Japanese city. Take a look.
やっぱり広島を政治的にも利用していると思いますし、 もちろん反対しています。今でも五輪は反対していますけれども、このような形でオリンピックが行われたとしても、本当に喜ぶ人っていうのはいないんじゃないかなと思います。100% 喜ぶ人ですね。
International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach laid a wreath at a memorial to the victims of the 1945 atomic bombing in Hiroshima on Friday, but the spectator-free event held in the rain with the only sound coming from the cries of distant protesters. According to the Washington Post, Bach also visited the Peace Memorial Museum and the Atomic Bomb Dome, one of the few buildings left standing after the attack nearly 76 years ago. IOC Vice President John Coates is taking part in similar events in Nagasaki, which was struck by an atomic bomb 3 days after Hiroshima. The pair are using their visits to promote the first day of the Olympic truce, a tradition from ancient Greece that was supposed to allow competitors and spectators to travel to the Games in peace, an idea revived by the IOC and supported by the United Nations in the 1990s. Bach promised this week that there was zero risk of the coronavirus spreading in the Olympic Village or to the Japanese public as a result of the Games, which he billed as the most restrictive sports event ever in the world. This week, 2 American and 2 British contractors were arrested by police for suspected cocaine use during a night out in Tokyo, according to local media. Police are searching for the missing Ugandan, a weightlifter, according to broadcaster NHK. 2 Ugandans, an athlete and a coach, tested positive for the coronavirus after they arrived in Japan last month. They are among around 30 game participants and workers who have tested positive. The member of the Nigerian delegation, a non-athlete over 60, only experienced mild symptoms but was hospitalized as a precaution, according to TV Asahi.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back. The World Health Organization said that the second stage of an investigation into the origins of COVID-19 should include further studies in China and lab audits. Take a look.
Knowing, understanding what happened can help us to prevent the problem from happening in the future. But second, I think we owe it to the millions who suffered and to the millions who died really to understand what happened. And I hope there will be better cooperation. And we have continued the engagement with China and also with member states. And there will be better cooperation to get into the bottom of what happened.
In a closed-door briefing to member states, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus proposed 5 priorities for the next phase of the investigation, and they included audits of relevant laboratories and research institutions operating in the area of the initial human cases identified in December 2019, according to a copy of his opening statement provided by the WHO. He also suggested investigators should focus on studies prioritizing geographic areas with the earliest indication of circulation of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. And he called for more studies of animal markets in and around the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the disease was first detected.
Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the White House is worried on China's evasiveness on the origins of COVID-19. Beijing, meanwhile, rebuffed the WHO's accusation that China failed to share raw data needed for an investigation into the pandemic's origins, insisting experts were given adequate access when they visited the country earlier this year. Take a look.
We certainly continue to be concerned, Peter, about misinformation coming from voices in China about certainly the origins, their lack of participation in the process, their lack of willingness to provide data and information to the World Health Organization. As you know, we are undergoing our own process here, our 90-day review here, but certainly the Chinese providing information, being a participant in the process, would aid the effort.
事实是，联合专家组在华考察期间，中方逐条展示了特别需要关注的原始数据。外方专家也多次明确表示，专家组获得了大量数据和信息，对由于部分信息涉及个人隐私不能复制和携带出境表示。
Originally derided as a right-wing conspiracy theory and vehemently rejected by Beijing, the idea that COVID-19 may have emerged from a lab leak has been gaining increasing momentum, particularly in the United States. China has consistently blasted any suggestion that the lab leak could have been possible as politically motivated and unscientific. But Dr. Tedros emphasized on Thursday that more investigation was needed before the hypothesis could be definitely ruled out.
Now, here in the country, health officials warned of a possible surge in coronavirus infections as the first locally transmitted cases of the highly contagious Delta variant were recorded and more than 3 million people went into lockdown. Take a look.
Pangalan po ng ating Secretary Francisco T. Duque III, ang Department of Health, the University of the Philippines, Philippine Genome Center, and the University of the Philippines National Institutes for Health report the detection of 16 new Delta variant cases, including the first local cases based on the latest whole genome sequencing report. 5 of the 16 cases are returning overseas Filipinos. 1 case arrived in the Philippines from the United Kingdom on April 26, 2021, has been tagged as recovered after undergoing the 14-day quarantine period. Another 2 of these cases arrived in the Philippines from Qatar on June 15, 2021, and have also been tagged as recovered. The Department of Health is still verifying the arrival and the quarantine status of the 2 other returning overseas Filipino cases. 11 cases are classified as local cases. 6 cases had been detected in Region 10 and are part of a large cluster of cases with dates of onset between June 23 to June 28. All of these individuals had been tagged as recovered. 2 cases have also been detected in the National Capital Region. 1 case was tagged as dead after being rushed to the emergency room of a hospital on June 28. The other case is an outpatient with an onset date of June 23, who was tagged also as recovered already. On the other case, an outpatient with an onset date of June 27 was also tagged as recovered, was initially tested here in the National Capital Region, but has an indicative address in Region 3. All of these cases have no known connection to each other. The last 2 local cases were detected in Region 6, both with an onset date of May 27. Both also had been tagged as recovered. With our 4-door strategy, we have delayed the entry of this Delta variant with the activation of doors 1 and door 2. Now that we have detected additional cases of Delta variants, and because they are local cases, we are now activating doors 3 and 4. Door 3 would involve strengthening the implementation of our PDITR strategies to immediately detect and isolate possible COVID-19 cases, while Door 4 is ensuring that our healthcare capacity is ready for a surge.
Now, cases have eased in recent months, hovering around 5,000 or 6,000 a day. COVID rules have been relaxed in many parts of the country, but masks and face shields are mandatory in public. But as the Delta variant fuels infections around the world, the Philippines has tightened border restrictions for travelers from some of the worst-hit countries, including neighboring Indonesia. Residents in the central province of Iloilo and the southern cities of Cagayan de Oro and Gingoog have been ordered to stay home. Non-essential business shuttered and religious services banned. In a Facebook post, infectious disease expert Dr. Edsel Salvana said the Delta variant detections do not yet represent widespread transmission. He added that with the detection of Delta variant cases, including local ones, the Philippines is better able to tailor its responses to the continuing COVID threat. And so far, the Philippines has taken delivery of some 22 million vaccines, including 13 million Sinovac doses from China, at additional 1.15 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine arrive in the country on Friday, while 1.5 million more Sinovac doses are expected on Saturday.
Staying here in the Philippines, the road toward population protection just got wider with the arrival of 1.5 million doses of government-procured Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine today. Department of Health's Dr. Ariel Valencia, the Director for Supply Chain Management Service, said the new supply will be distributed nationwide for second dose rollout. 1 million doses of Sinovac also arrived 3 days earlier as the country upped to 14.5 million the total doses of Sinovac, including those donated by the Chinese government and procured by the private sector and local government units. Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. earlier said 16,790,240 doses will be delivered this month and another 16,570,000 in August. On July 15, a record high 391,283 doses were administered. That brought to 14.4 million the total doses already injected, 10.1 million first shots and 4.3 million second shots.
In other news, Barcelona and other cities in northeastern Spain will reimpose a nighttime curfew starting this weekend to fight the surge in virus cases after the measure won court approval on Friday. The curfew is aimed at discouraging social gatherings on beaches and in parks to curb a spike in cases of the highly contagious Delta variant, especially among unvaccinated young people. Catalonia's regional government asked the courts this week for permission to restore a nightly curfew between between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. in areas where infection rates surpass 400 cases per 100,000 inhabitants over a 7-day period. The top court in the northeastern region on Friday approved the move, which will affect 161 municipalities, including popular beach resorts like Sitges, Salou, and Lloret de Mar. The curfew will be in place until July 23, although the Catalan government can ask to extend it. The curfew will likely have to be extended for several weeks, that according to the court. Catalonia, the epicenter of Spain's jump in infections, has already ordered all public gatherings to finish by 12:30 a.m. and restricted gatherings to 10 people.
The EU's disease agency said it was predicting a sharp increase in coronavirus cases, with nearly 5 times as many new infections by August 1st. The expected rise in cases was linked to the highly transmissible Delta variant first identified in India, along with the relaxing of measures in European countries. In its coverage area, which includes the European Union, Norway, and Iceland, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, or ECDC, expected to see 420 cases per 100,000 inhabitants for the week ending on August 1st, up from just under 90 last week, it said in a weekly report. By the week after, the number of new cases is expected to rise above 620 per 100,000 inhabitants. The current continuing deterioration of the epidemiological situation in many countries is expected to continue given the rapid increase in the Delta variant, the ECDC said in that report. Hospitalizations and deaths are also expected, although at a slower pace, according to the ECDC, thanks to the rollout of vaccination campaigns.
Meanwhile, Fiji dismissed calls for a hard lockdown as COVID cases reached record levels in the Pacific island nation, insisting that a no-jab, no-job vaccination push would contain the virus. The troubled tropical paradise has been devastated by a runaway outbreak of the Delta variant, which began in April, ending a year without local transmission and quashing hopes the vital tourism sector could reopen. Latest official figures revealed there were 1,405 new cases in the 24 hours to Friday, giving the country of 930,000 one of the world's highest per capita infection rates. Opposition leaders and welfare groups have called for strict stay-at-home orders, but the government has resisted, arguing the economic cost would be too high.
In a clinic in a remote Myanmar town, some of the few doctors still working after the coup emptied hospitals or battling to keep their COVID-19 patients alive as the virus surges. Take a look.
Okay. ကျွန်တော်တို့ဆေးရုံမှာဆိုရင်အလုံး80လောက်သုံးပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါလည်းသူတို့တိတ်ပြီးတော့မလုံလောက်ပါဘူးသို့တော့အပြင်ကအိမ်တိုင်းမှာဒုက္ခရောက်နေဆိုတော့သူတို့ကိုမျှပြီးတော့ပေးရတယ်တိုင်းရင်းဆေးရုံကိုဗစ်ဆေးရုံကိုလည်းမျှပေးရတယ်နောက်ပြီးတော့လူမှုအဖွဲ့အစည်းတွေကလည်းသူတို့ကိုလည်းမျှပေးရတယ်ဆိုတော့ဒီအုံနောက်အစားဆုံးကတော့အောက်ဆီဂျင်ပြဿနာဖြစ်ပါတယ်
ပထမတော့ဒုတိယတော့ဒီက home quarantine နေနေဖြစ်ဖြစ်ပြီးတော့လည်းယောဂကုသ
နှုံးအနေနဲ့ဖြစ်ပေါ့နော်တော်တော်လေးဒီတတိယလှိုင်းနဲ့ကွာခြားတော့တွေ့ရပါတယ်ဒီချိန်တတိယလှိုင်းမှာကျတော့နိုင်ငံရေးအခြေအနေမကောင်းတာကြောင့်လည်းအများကြီးပါမယ်လို့ကျွန်တော်မြင်မိပါတယ်ပြီးတော့လည်းဒီတတိယလှိုင်းကကလေးမျိုးနေထားနေဆိုတော့တော်တော်ကြောက်ဖို့ကောင်းပါလို့မြင်မိပါတယ်ဟုတ်
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Ang trabaho naman talaga ng maritime group ng PNP is to enforce the maritime laws.
Tayo lang yung stricto, pero in other parts of the country, pwede na naman ang tourism.
Definitely, we are ready to respond to a possible spike.
Sapagkat ang aming intensyon ay makatulong lang sa mga tao na wala talagang magamit na gamot.
92 voted for this resolution, which will make it stronger, calling on the Justice Department to come up with more stringent ways to be able to avert these hate crimes against Asian Americans.
Mas marami po tayong magagamit ngayon na mga tools or mga equipment.
Maraming salamat, Weng, at sa buong puwersa ng Balitalakayan sa pagkakataong ito.
Tatalakayin ang mga pangunahing balita live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Weng de la Fuente sa Balitalakayan.
We live in interesting times.
In good shape. Do's and don'ts that will help you stay fit for the rest of your life. We answer the question, what do our bodies really need? In good shape.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. The Philippines and Singapore agreed to bolster ties in the areas of defense, trade and investment, labor and health, specifically on pandemic responses as the region continued to battle the COVID-19 pandemic worsened by the emergence of the more infectious Delta variant. In a July 16 statement posted on its website, the Department of Foreign Affairs said the two neighbors had productive discussions on the overall development of their bilateral relations during the virtual fifth informal consultations on the Philippines-Singapore Action Plan, or ICP-SAP, on Wednesday. Now, both sides agreed to explore various initiatives to further enhance these economic ties and to hasten post-pandemic recovery. According to the DFA, one key project discussed was the facilitation of the entry of Philippine agricultural products such as eggs, poultry, and vegetables to Singapore, which in turn will aid Singapore's bid to diversify its food import sources. The Philippines also invited Singapore to invest in the development of green and smart cities, particularly in New Clark City, industrial parks and economic zones, clean and renewable energy sources, and waste and water management systems. Singapore, meanwhile, recognized the contribution of the more than 200,000 Filipinos to its socio-economic development and highlighted the key role of Filipino healthcare workers in its pandemic response.
The United States warned its business community of growing risks of operating in Hong Kong due to China's clampdown, as an increasing number of Western companies consider abandoning the historic financial hub. The United States also imposed sanctions on 7 more Chinese officials in Hong Kong, as it vowed there would be a price for Beijing's imposition of a draconian security law a year ago. Take a look.
Yesterday, the situation in Hong Kong is continuing to deteriorate, and we continue to see Beijing assault Hong Kong's autonomy and democratic institutions. We've seen authorities use the national security law to make politically motivated arrests, and we've seen a general deterioration of fundamental freedoms, which were guaranteed by an international agreement. So that's why the United States, we announced steps we're taking today to promote accountability and transparency on the
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in a statement Beijing has chipped away at Hong Kong's reputation of accountable, transparent governance and respect for individual freedoms, and has broken its promise to leave Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy unchanged for 50 years. Today, we send a clear message that the United States resolutely stands with Hong Kongers, he said. In a long-awaited advisory that has already been denounced by China, U.S. government agencies led by the State Department told businesses that they face growing risks in Hong Kong. As a result of these changes, they should be aware of potential reputational, regulatory, financial, and in certain instances, legal risks associated with their Hong Kong operations. The advisory acknowledged that Hong Kong, a former British colony handed back to China in 1997, retains many economic distinctions from the mainland, including stronger protections of intellectual property. But it pointed to a declining climate under the national security law, including the arrest of one U.S. citizen, John Clancy, a prominent human rights lawyer. China imposed the law in June 2020 after massive and sometimes destructive protests that demanded the preservation of fundamental rights promised to the city before the handover. Dozens of people have been charged under the law, including the media tycoon Jimmy Lai, former lawmakers, and pro-democracy activists. The U.S. advisory also warned of heightened risks to data privacy and less access to information, noting the closure of a leading newspaper, Apple Daily, which was a thorn in the side of authorities. The advisory also highlighted that businesses were at greater risk of incurring U.S. sanctions, which have been aimed in particular at banks that work with the police. In the latest sanctions, the United States blocked any U.S. assets of 7 deputy directors of the Liaison Office, which represents Beijing in Hong Kong.
Chinese electronics firm Xiaomi has overtaken Apple as the #2 global smartphone maker in a sizzling market, with consumers emerging from lockdowns, according to a new survey. The Canalys survey of second quarter sales released on Thursday showed worldwide smartphone sales up 12%, with South Korea's Samsung holding its top position with a 19% market share. Xiaomi, meanwhile, surged to the #2 position for the first time ever, with a 17% share as sales jumped 83%, according to Canalys. Apple dropped to the #3 position, with iPhone sales up just 1% after getting a lift from last year's new models.
A U.S. federal judge on Friday dealt a fresh blow to an immigration program protecting undocumented migrants brought to the country as children, ruling it unlawful and blocking the enrollment of new applicants. Instituted by former President Barack Obama in 2012, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, covers around 700,000 people known as Dreamers. For many, America is the only country they have ever known. In his ruling, Judge Andrew Hanen of the United States District Court in Houston said Obama exceeded his authority when he instituted DACA by executive order. The government must stop accepting people to the program, he said, though he added it could still receive applications. He said the ruling did not require the Department of Homeland Security or Department of Justice to take any immigration, deportation, or criminal action against any DACA recipient, applicant, or any other individual that it would not otherwise take. The ruling also did not immediately affect the status of people already accepted to the program. To apply for DACA protection, which also allows the right to work, applicants must have arrived in the United States before the age of 16. Applicants must be in school or have a high school degree or equivalent, or have been honorably discharged from the military and have a clean criminal record. In 2017, then President Donald Trump tried to dismantle it on grounds that it was unconstitutional, triggering a lengthy court battle.
And Pacific Rim leaders vowed to ramp up the production and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines at an emergency virtual meeting to develop an action plan that will contain the global pandemic. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who convened the online summit at short notice, described discussions as rich, saying they set a strong agenda for APEC's major leaders meeting in November. Take a look.
First, we agreed on the overriding imperative to tackle the health dimensions of COVID-19. We need to suppress transmission, do everything we can to get as many people vaccinated as soon as possible, and strengthen our health systems. To support these goals, we need to keep our supply chains of vaccines and other medical products operating as smoothly as possible. Each of the economies will need to chart our own paths through the crisis, but none of us are alone, nor can we achieve the full potential of safe and healthy economies by going alone. We're ultimately all in this together. By collaborating, exchanging ideas as we just have, we can all find a faster way through this crisis. By coming together for this extraordinary meeting, APEC leaders showed their unity of purpose, and it is through joining and working together that we will grow together. Top of mind for leaders is achieving widespread access for vaccines. This is the overriding focus for APEC in the world. APEC's already agreed to work collectively to speed up the flow of vaccines across borders. As leaders, we're focusing our efforts on how to get vaccines to everyone as soon as possible. This means that we have collective agreement to move beyond vaccine nationalism, and we're focusing on all aspects of contributing to the global vaccination efforts, making vaccines, sharing vaccines, and using them.
The unprecedented talks brought together heads of state from the 21-nation Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC group, including U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. President Xi said China had already supplied developing countries with more than 500 million COVID vaccine doses. The U.S. said that it was also donating more than 500 million safe and effective vaccines around the world. Biden made clear that the U.S. or the United States is donating our vaccines not sent. In a joint communique, the APEC leaders vowed to redouble their efforts to expand vaccine manufacture and supply.
The original talent search, Tagisan ng Galing Part 2 of Net25 ended today, July 17. And after almost 1 year of search, Carl Assis Tanhueco won the singing category. And for the dance group, the Sirens took the first place. Now, the grand competition was held at the Philippine Arena in Bukawe, Bulacan. And Carl Tanhueco performed the song She's Gone by Steelheart. Here are the list of all winners in both categories. For singing edition, we have third place, Kimberly Reyes, or second runner-up, Chito Reyes, first runner-up, Elizabeth Leyba, and the grand winner, of course, Carl Aris Tanhueco. For the dance edition, fourth runner-up, Jed and Rose, third runner-up, Impact Boy, second runner-up, Be Mad Unknown. And the first runner-up is a Junior New System and the grand winner, the Sirens.
Nasa harap mo na, bro, ang pinapangarap mong 2 million peso grand prize at ang tagisan ng galing grand winner trophy. Ayan, sige, let's take a picture muna.
There you go, 2 million grand prize.
2 million grand prize and 1 million for the first runner-up.
Wow.
Yeah, the biggest. That's why they said, it's the biggest competition or talent competition in the country in terms of prizes that they gave out. So congratulations to all the winners.
Congratulations, guys.
And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. See you back on Monday.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back on Monday. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we live
in interesting times.